Good day, everyone, and welcome to the Bianca Williams podcast. I'm your host, Bianca Williams, therapist, coach, wife, and mom. I actually sound a little sick today, y'all, because my voice is trying to go out. So if I just don't sound like myself, that's why. But I feel okay. But this is a perfect time to talk about something that is just I guess, topic that is speaking my language, which is stress management. We are getting into that today. We have the perfect guest to talk about that with. Today's guest is Rachel McNeil. I want to welcome you, Rachel, and tell the people a little bit about you because not only is she talking about stress management, she specifically does stress management with a certain kind of person. So when I say she's speaking my language, she's speaking my language, and she probably speaking some of y'all language too. So get ready. You guys are in for a treat today. Rachel McNeil, MED LPC, founder of Amateur Nicole Coaching and Consulting LLC, or ONCC, is based in Houston, Texas, educates and empowers stressed entrepreneurs, professionals, and ambitious individuals. Through solution focused wellness training, she enhances life balance and self care. Ooh, we need that. A mother, wife, educator, entrepreneur, and licensed professional counselor. Her passions lie in education and mental health counseling. With experience in diverse settings like psychiatric hospitals and private practice, she understands the impact of chronic stress on mental health. ONCC offers practical solutions to promote emotional well-being, targeting clients overwhelmed by constant demands. Rachel advocates for stress management and self-care, so she balances her life by cherishing family time, reading books, and crafting custom candles. If you don't know about her, you guys pay attention. Today, we're going to kick this off by just talking about high achievers in general in stress. They often face significant pressure to perform at a consistent high level. So, Rachel, how do you define stress in the context of high achievement, and what are some common sources of stress for individuals striving for excellence?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me. I think this is a very important topic that I think people know about, but they don't necessarily pay enough attention to. Because as you know, people who are high achieving, they seem like they have it all together, right? Nobody is really worried about them. They know how to fight through and power through things. So when we talk about stress for the high achiever, we are talking about like allowing you to focus on that strong friend, right? So stress, just a general basic definition of stress. First off, it can be positive or negative, right? And stress is our reaction, physical, physiological reactions to any perceived threats or demands. And so our brain, it's important for us to know that our brain doesn't know if the threat is real, like we're about to get in a car accident or a bear is chasing us, or it's perceived like I have so many deadlines to hit at work. I have so many things I need to do at school. My kids, my husband, my spouse, my family, everybody needs me. Your brain doesn't know if it's real or not, but your body's going to react the same either way. And so that's when our stress hormones go up, right? So when we are pumped full of adrenaline, when we are pumped full of cortisol, I think most people have, they know that phrase that stress kills, but they don't really know why. Well, if our body is in a constant state of chronic stress, then our body is constantly pushing, these stress hormones, which is really breaking our body down, right? Because we typically don't need the stress hormones unless we need to get safe, right? So we might be familiar with the fight, flight, or freeze modes, right? So if we're seeing danger, we're either going to get out of there, right? We're going to run. If we can't run, we're going to fight. If we can't fight, we're going to freeze. And sometimes, especially for the high achiever, freezing looks like a complete shutdown, right? Breaking themselves out from their normal tasks, isolating from family, withdrawing, so much and so forth. So I think being aware of just stress in and of itself, and like I said, stress is positive or negative, but also how is your body responding to it?
Oh
And
my
then,
God.
oh, go ahead.
I'm just over here in awe. I'm so sorry. You could keep going because I'm like, I need my notepad out. You're sharing so much hopeful stuff.
Right. And then you mentioned like what are some of the areas that high achievers typically are stressed out about? I think, well, for myself and for a lot of the clients I work with, it's that perfectionism, right? Like, am I doing everything right? Am I dotting all my I's? Am I crossing all my T's? Am I doing everything right that I'm supposed to? It's a fear of failure. I know for me personally, it's a fear of disappointment, beginnings, or traumatic childhoods. And so when we reach a point of success, it's like, do I belong here? Am I supposed to be here? Our expectations of ourselves, the perception of ourselves, in these different spaces, like going back to the imposter syndrome, like, am I supposed to be here? Do people care that I'm here? Am I right that I'm here? Comparing ourselves to other people. Uh,
Yeah.
what else stresses that reputation, right? Because if you built yourself up to a certain level, you want to make sure you can maintain that reputation. So if I'm the strong friend, I want to be the strong friend. I want to show up for everybody. Loneliness, burnout. I mean, I can go on and on, right?
Yeah.
Overcommitting, self-doubt, lack of confidence, all those things play into, the primary stressors for high achievers.
So if I'm hearing you correct, it definitely sounds like while you may gravitate towards just like that constant need to be successful, kind of maintain that certain like way of operating at a high level,
Hmm.
it's not sustainable because the body absolutely needs stress breaks from stress. You kind of need to incorporate in self-care. You have to find
Hmm.
balance. Like I'm hearing a lot of that. And as a high achiever, I feel like we're both high achievers for sure. But as a
Hmm.
high achiever, can you identify or talk about a specific moment or experience where you were overwhelmed by stress and how you effectively managed to overcome that challenge?
Yeah. Um, so many of them. I think for me, a lot of my ambition was driven by like always hitting the next goal. Then that looked like chasing titles. Then that looked like chasing a certain income. So, yeah, most of my career, I have been in leadership roles. And so, those of us that have been leaders, managers, directors, so on and so forth, you have the stress of like managing the different personalities in your department, managing. I worked for a lot of federal grant programs, so managing
Mhm.
all the requirements for those, the stress of politics for upper management, right? Anybody who has had the experience of wanting to excel in their careers, there's certain politics that come along with that. So there's certain things that you need to do in order to achieve. I think one of my biggest stressors in the different environments that I've been in was my leadership philosophy being different from my peers. And so I
Mhm.
think that came to a head in several of my career choices that led me to feel like out of place, to doubt my own excellence, right? To struggle with walking away from some nice salaries. But I think overall, the working long hours. I remember one job in particular, I missed my baby's whole flag football season. Right. And so it was like working long hours, needing to feel like I have to do all these things, right? These are the things that are required of me. So I have to do them. At all the while, I'm ignoring the headaches, ignoring the body aches, realizing I'm irritable but not paying attention to it, crying, isolating, sleeping. I'm an emotional eater, eating all the sweets and the breads that were around, right? And I think for me, I'll say my come to Jesus moment was honestly just being tired of feeling bad, tired of missing out on things going on with my family. I really had to slow down and listen to my body, right? So you mentioned earlier about the, wanting to operate at a high level. Always wanted to strive, always wanted to do things. Well, that's all well and good, but if you're working on fumes and your body is burning out, you're not doing much good for you or the people who depend on you, right? So I think for me, it was really getting into alignment with what was most important for me, which is what helped me with my own burnout.
Yeah. When
Yeah.
that check engine light come on for your body, it's definitely a wake up
That
call.
part.
It's like you said, like stress, like you don't always know it. You could be just pushing yourself and just like, I'm
Yeah.
capable of doing this, so I'm gonna do it. I could stay up all
Right.
night. I can like, skip meals, all of this different stuff. I
Right.
could wake up early, go to sleep late. And all of that contributes to your stress. But even if you can't recognize it, pay attention to your body because it will tell you. Your
Right.
body will tell you.
And then
And
even telling, oh,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry to cut you off, but I was saying even what's going on in your mind, like you said, well, I
True.
can operate, I can do it, right? Or maybe even telling yourself, who else gonna do it, or everybody else need me to do it, or I'm the only person that can do it. That might be all well and good, but like you said, if you are burning out, not sleeping, eating too much, if you are pushing yourself beyond where you can be, that's just not good for anybody.
Yeah, for sure. You are so right because you do start getting different messages in your mind when you're not in a good place.
Hmm.
And it's just not good for anybody. It's not good for you. It's not good for the people around you.
Right.
What would you say are some effective strategies high achievers can employ to manage stress and
Mhm.
maintain peak performance levels? And how do you strike that balance between pushing yourself to excel and avoiding burnout?
Yeah. So one of the things I've had to do for myself, well, let me back up. In my opinion, stress management is self-care, right? So we hear a lot about, okay, I want to do stress care. I want to go on this girls trip. I want to, get my nails done. I'm gonna get massages. So all of those things are important components to stress management, but also being mindful of kind of the four, what I see as the four main components of stress management, which is number one, you have to understand how stress impacts you, right? So we talk about the warning signs. What's happening to you mentally, right? Or you getting a lot of brain fog, or you can't remember what you was about to do. What's happening physically? Are you getting headaches? Are you getting body aches? There was one time when I was so stressed out that I couldn't move my neck, right? But I didn't recognize it as stress at the time, right? What's happening for you emotionally? Like, are you crying a lot? Are you feeling hopeless? Are you know, cognitively? Again, are you foggy brained? Like, what's happening for you? Knowing what your warning signs are is so important. Like, we all, excuse me, I can't remember the psychologist's name, but he identified that we all have what's called a window of tolerance, right?
Mhm.
So we have our optimal level of functioning given life's stressors, right? It's important for us to know when we are pushing outside of that window of tolerance, because either we are going to be super anxious and can't turn off, or we're going to fall flat. Remember, I talked about fight, flight, or freeze, right? If
Mhm.
we are constantly activated, we're constantly anxious, or if we are kind of getting depressed, nothing even matters, we are feeling hopeless. It's important to know kind of where we are, to increase our own self awareness there. But then also, what is your relationship with yourself, right? So we
Yeah.
talked a little bit about that internal dialogue. What are you saying to yourself? What's the negative self talk, right? The third portion is your relationship with other people. Like, are you allowing those relationships to burn you out? That looks at like communicating effectively, right? Establishing some healthy boundaries. But then the fourth component is balancing that all. So what do you need to eliminate out your life? What do you need to delegate? What do you need to prioritize? So really looking at stress management through the lens of self-care, to know your limits and give yourself permission to say no. And I think those are the things that I had to come to terms with. As I mentioned earlier, recognizing when my body was screaming, stop, right? I think we all
Mhm.
know if we don't stop for ourselves, our body will shut us down.
It
And
will.
usually it's at a time, it's at a time where it's not the most convenient. That's why you have to listen to yourself.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
One of the things that you said made me think about how some of the messages that make you feel like you have to do things at a certain level, where
Hmm.
you when you talked about coming from those relationships, it's almost like the culture or the communities or the family or something like that expectations sometimes push people to
Hmm.
lack boundaries, to feel like, well, I can't say no, or even if this is not something that I'm aligned with, I have to do it. And I think that's really hard for a lot of people.
Hmm.
And so you said something super important about like really looking at those relationships and how they may kind of contribute to your stress. 'Cause I see that a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna be honest, I work with a lot of, like high achievers. And one thing I notice is that whether it's nature or nurture, right? Whether you are born to accomplish great things or you are groomed, to just be a hard worker, reach
Right.
for just great heights. Like, it becomes natural for people over time. And so I don't think it's hard for them to do it. They just naturally are higher achievers after some point. However, like you said, stress over a period of time or prolonged stress can take a toll on you physically
Hmm.
and mentally. And so, what are some ways that people can recognize those signs of excessive stress? And what steps do you take to prevent stress from negatively impacting your health and performance?
Yeah, yeah. I will say, just kind of piggyback off what you said, when you're used to operating at high levels, or if you're used to being expected to do all the things, like I'm the second oldest of four. I've always been
Mhm.
responsible, right? My parents always had an expectation of, get your education. That's the only thing that can't be taken from you, right? So I've always had kind of this innate that I have to do better, I have to reach for more, right? And I think when you're used to operating in a space of, what's that saying? Like, I don't get tired, like I have to keep pushing. It's hard to appreciate the calm when you're used to chaos, right? And
Wow.
so, yeah. And so recognizing those signs within yourself, like at what point, like going back to relationships, is there a relationship that you feel absolutely drained by? Whenever the phone rings, you're like, come on now, or whenever the email comes up,
Yeah.
recognizing your body's changes, right? Recognizing your responses to, those individuals or, the things that are fighting for your time and attention. Do you find yourself wanting to escape, wanting to isolate, wanting to withdraw? Or are you drinking more, smoking more, looking for other ways to escape? Are you having mood swings, right? Are you experiencing, I'll go back to body aches and headaches because that's how I know, for myself that things are not quite right. Um, Again, are you sleeping too much? Are you sleeping too little? Are you eating too much? Are you not eating enough? Are you feeling a lot of self-doubt? So being really mindful of how your body is responding. I think for most high achievers, you're so used to going that you don't recognize it, or you've been taught to ignore the signs and keep pushing through. So I think really giving yourself permission to pause and slow down and say, well, how does this feel for me? You know, um,
Yeah.
I think constantly checking in with yourself is important. For some people, it looks like journaling. I recognize a lot of people can't really stay consistent with journaling. So I do brain dumping. With my journal, I bullet point like, okay, these are the thoughts I'm having. These are the emotions that I'm having. I don't necessarily do anything with them, but I think getting them outside of my head and outside of my body and even recognizing them is helpful. Therapy. I mean, getting a therapist, even if you're only going, twice a week. I mean, not twice a week, twice a month, or whatever that might look like for you. Having somebody outside of your immediate circle, having somebody that doesn't know you, that you could really talk to, bounce things off of is important. Coaching. I mean, stress management coaching is what I specialize in. So having somebody to give you tools, to walk you through the tools and kind of support you along the way. Again, I think the biggest thing is slowing down enough for that quiet reflection. High achievers, ambitious individuals, they know is to push, the grind, the push, the hustle. But really, it's a gift to you to slow down and just like, okay, I'm gonna pause, I'm gonna step back. It's always gonna be a million and three things on your to-do list. So allowing yourself to be one of those many things, to really
Mm,
check in, take a moment, respond, pause and then responding accordingly, I guess.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that. First of all, just putting yourself on the agenda. I like that
Mm-hmm.
message because, like you said, everything else is on that agenda. Your to do list is long already. Why you not on there? And something else you said that stood out that even made me think about a memoir I recently read by Will Smith where he talked about for a long time he didn't like really acknowledge or tune into people's feelings because just some of his personal beliefs from childhood. And so when you talk about or just experiences from his childhood, shall I say, but when you talk about like having different forms of outlets, whether it's journaling, therapy,
Mm-hmm.
coaching, exercise, all of these different things, another source. I think that's super important because when you're a high achiever, a lot of times you compartmentalize your feelings almost as if
Mm-hmm.
they're not
Oof.
even a part of a part of you almost. And it's
Right.
like, how do you get that out? Because it's there. And like you said, you release stress hormones over time that end up showing up as health issues in some way, whether you're being
Mm-hmm.
forgetful or you are starting to have other like body aches or, just different things like that. I can't sleep.
Yeah.
My thoughts are going all over the place. So I really like resonated with that when you said that. I like that.
Yeah.
Time management, because you just talked about putting yourself on the schedule. Time management is crucial for high
Mm-hmm.
achievers, juggling multiple responsibilities and goals. It's natural for them, but like, how do you prioritize tasks and responsibilities to minimize stress and maximize productivity? Are there any tools or techniques that you find particularly helpful in
Mm-hmm.
managing your time effectively?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the number one thing to know is that everything can't get done or everything doesn't need to be done in that moment, right? I think a common misconception is that, I'm the only one that can do it. It has to get done. It all has to happen right now. But it doesn't. It really doesn't.
Mhm.
Some strategies that work for me personally. A long time ago, Stephen Covey wrote a book, Seven Habits for Highly Effective People, and one of the habits is kind of putting first things first. Basically, it talks about time management and prioritizing, and one of the tools he talks about is big rocks. So essentially, what big rocks are the three things that need to happen in that day, right? So every other thing. So let's say I need to get notes done. I need to send the invoice to a client. I also need to wash my clothes, right? So
Mhm.
let's say those are my three big rocks for today. I'm going to tackle those at the top of the day. So number one, I already feel accomplished. I already got the things done that I need to do. And anything
Yeah.
outside of that are just bonuses, right? So it's a way. I mean, another thing for high achievers is we like praise, we like accomplishment, we like to know that things are getting done and we can feel good about them. So setting yourself up to accomplish the three things that must happen in that day first really helps set you up, right, as far as your time or feeling like you are effectively managing your time. Second thing I do is that I'm easily distracted. Always been easily distracted, but that there's a method called the Pomodoro method. Basically, it's like the pomodoro, like the tomato. It was based off the tomato's timer. But basically, you are minimizing distractions and also allowing yourself to take breaks. So I think the original Pomodoro is like work for 25 minutes and take a break for 3 to 5 minutes. If I'm working on something, I can't just stop after 25 minutes. So for me, if I can work on something for like an hour and then take like a 15-minute break and then get back to it, it really allows me to kind of immerse myself in that moment, in that hour, whatever I need to work on, get it done, and then allow myself to break away from it to take the break. And then when I get back to the next hour or 30 minutes, then to focus. So that's really helpful for me. And then the last thing is making smart goals. I think we've all heard that, you make the goals and you get them done. But if, what's the saying? A goal without a plan is just a wish. And
Yeah.
so when we have SMART goals, so again, that's specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound, when we're making those goals for ourselves, we can actually check it off like, okay, I got it done. And so
Yeah.
it actually helps us when we can organize our time by, focus, prioritizing on what's most important, minimizing distractions, and then also knowing that we have a very specific goal to reach. I think it helps us get some of our time back and feel more accomplished in the long run.
You know, it made that you said so much. Okay, so here we go. The what was it, Pomodoro method?
Mhm.
I did not know that was the name of it. So I remember when I was kind of at the peak of my stress at the time, I was working somewhat 12-hour days sometime, 8-hour days sometime. I had a kindergartner, a toddler at home, and then I was also studying for my licensure exam. And I was like, I gotta study, study, study. So I was spending like 4 hours or something like that at Starbucks.
Yeah.
Because it just was a nice environment for me to study. And my husband told me, he said, your productivity diminishes over time. And so there's this peak of like, imagine as a car engine driving 100 miles per hour where you're like super productive, you're moving fast, you're getting stuff in. But he said, even when you do that, like go for a period of time, stop and take a brain break where you do nothing. Like, read, you don't force your brain to work, basically just pause and let yourself kind of
Right.
digest things. And then he also said, have a cutoff time that you don't go past because like you
Mhm.
mentioned, you're not moving at 100 miles per hour anymore. Your car now is like it has gone down to 80 over time. It's maybe down to
Yeah.
60. At some point it's down to 50. So what you think you're taking in, excuse me,
Mhm.
or how long it took you to get through certain like concepts or things like that in the beginning is now taking you a lot longer, or things are not getting in the same way. So he said cut off at a certain time to allow yourself to go back home, go to sleep. There's a part of your
Mhm.
brain that needs to rest to let the information digest and sink in
Mhm.
so that you can actually use it. Otherwise, you actually may be losing information thinking you're taking it in because
Right.
you're forcing your
Mhm.
brain to move too fast. I love that. You said something else about time. I can't even remember what it, I remember, but I can't remember to say it right now.
Yeah.
But I thought that was super huge. Oh, I know what it was now. It was the setting something or creating a daily goal in a sense, like kind of
Mhm.
something to accomplish every day that's practical, that's reasonable,
Yeah.
so that sorry, I had to mute myself.
No, that's okay.
So that as you are I know for me, right? I get really excited when I have an ideal or
Hmm.
something to do, and then I'm like, oh, I gotta finish it today. And really, if you could just accomplish a part of that goal, you took some good steps towards it. And it could prevent burnout because if every
Right.
time you have an idea, you put this pressure on yourself to say, I got to do all of this stuff, then sometimes when you have an idea, you're like, I don't even feel like it. It's just too
Right.
much.
Right. It's
It's
just too, it's
exhausting.
overwhelming. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Bec-
celebrating yourself. Huh? What you was going to
Yeah.
say?
No, I was gonna say you're absolutely right. Like I love that you say your husband said kind of identify what is your peak performance. I know for me that's between 10 and 6. Like anytime before 10, I ain't gonna be no good. Anytime after 6, definitely won't be no good, right? So
Mhm.
identifying where can you get like that maximum benefit, but then also giving yourself a break. I think, with the clients I see so many times it's like I have to get it done, right?
Mhm.
You said there I have this idea, it needs to happen. I'm at this certain level, everybody's dependent on me. Constantly putting that pressure on yourself is not in the long run, it's not helping you. Right. Like you
Yeah.
said, your brain is only gonna work for so long anyway before it starts just dumping stuff out. Right.
Yeah.
So there's value in taking that break and allowing yourself to relax and enjoy and pause and separate, from all the
Yeah.
things that are putting pressure on you.
Absolutely. I love that. And just kind of speaking of some of the ways sometimes we feel this pressure to just keep going, a lot of that comes from perfectionism, as you mentioned
Mm-hmm.
earlier. And it is a common trait for high achievers because we want it right. We want, everything to represent us to
Yeah.
a T. We care about the final product, the details along the
Mm-hmm.
way, which means more work, right? And
Right.
so I feel like that also obviously can contribute to heightened stress levels and self criticism. How do you navigate the pressure to excel while maintaining a healthy perspective on success and failure? And can you share any strategies for overcoming perfectionism and embracing self compassion?
Yeah, absolutely. I think number one, identifying what's driving that urge to be perfect, right? Like you said, we have this big idea, we wanted to get it right. We maybe have this title, maybe we're in the C-suite, maybe we are, just now achieving as an entrepreneur, and we feel like we have to maintain the image or the reputation or the expectation. So really, identifying what it is that's driving that urge to be perfect, right? Because sometimes if the goal is it has to be perfect, we're going to be stuck in that idea that,
Mhm.
what is it, that analysis paralysis, like everything has to be perfect. It really doesn't, right? So
Yeah,
identifying, like, is it our childhood stuff, right? Is it the maybe the lack that we experience, some neglect that we experience, the pressure we may have experienced as childhood, or
mhm.
is it our expectations of ourselves or what we think other people might be expecting of us that's driving that urge to be perfect? Is there any guilt or shame that we might be dealing with that's driving that urge to be perfect? I know for me recently in parenting, I'm like, oh, I'm not showing up the way I'm supposed to for my baby. The guilt and shame that's around it. But first identifying what's driving the urge, but then paying attention to how you're talking to yourself. Right. Are you saying what are the shoulds? You should have did this. It should have been done. I ought to be better. I ought to I must, what are those extremes that we are pulling ourselves into? Right? I can't never get things right. I'm always late. What's the criticism that we are driving internally, because a lot of times it's being stuck in our own heads that's
For
uh,
sure.
keeping us stuck, right? But then also, how are you defining your success? Along with that, how are you defining your failures, right? Is it, you have to reach this goal by this age? I know for me, I had a certain salary that I wanted to hit by a certain age. And when I tell you I got laser focused on that, not in a good way, because it forced me to make some decisions out of emotion versus, looking at the logic and the, looking at it in a wise way.
Yeah.
Or again, the expectations. Are you following the expectations for you or that somebody else put on you? um
Yeah.
are you aligning with your values? For me, one of my main, like, come to Jesus moments were in my own therapy, figuring out what is it that I value, not the values of my family, not the values of society. What is it that is important to me? And then aligning my life, aligning everything that I do to fall into those three values. If it does not fall into those values, I don't do it. And I
Yeah.
think that's helped me experience more peace and less stress, because, if you're just kind of running around like a chicken with your head cut off and you're doing all the things because you feel like you should be doing all the things, it's kind of hard to identify, well, what's important for me? What do I want? Right. And then
Yeah,
when we talk about self-compassion, self-compassion is no different from the compassion that we show somebody else, right? So how we
that's
talk
huge.
to ourselves, like, are we talking to ourselves like somebody that we love or somebody that we hate? Right? Are we talking to ourselves like you know, again, like a friend? Are we
Mhm.
talking to ourselves like we would want a child to speak to themselves or about themselves? So I think self compassion is a lot about giving yourself grace. Again, the high achiever, there's always a next box to check, but acknowledging your frustrations, acknowledging your shortcomings, but then also not beating yourself up for them. So,
Yeah.
creating space for the positive and the negative that's
Mhm.
at play.
Oh my gosh. I love that compassion piece because, I think a lot of people don't realize how easy it is to give compassion to other people, but be this critic and bully to yourself. And it's like,
Hmm.
you can be so supportive to other people, but when it come to you, you kind of like don't give yourself no breaks,
Right.
no, benefits of the doubt, no understanding.
Right.
And so just like you could show up for other people, being able to assess like how am I showing up for myself? How am I talking
Absolutely.
to myself, especially when stuff ain't going right. And I feel like you said some really good things. So I deal definitely with adults with childhood trauma. And so a lot of those patterns that you struggle with or became a wound for you as a child may continue to show up at different points in
Hmm.
your adult life. And so if you had a caregiver, for example, that constantly criticize your performance, then you go into adulthood with this idea that I can't mess
Hmm.
up because I don't want, anybody to criticize my performance. And
Right.
it could be like just regular, giving you feedback type things. But anybody who criticizes that performance in any way becomes that parent again for you.
Right.
And you're
Right.
battling with that. So you're almost like putting this pressure on yourself to perform at in incredible levels. Sometimes I'll say that because
Absolutely.
sometimes people get some amazing things done, but also like at a very demanding level that could put a lot of pressure and stress on you.
Mhm.
Another thing, like I know we talk about like high achievers in a general way, but I know in the Black community, there is this
Oh,
idea that we always have to work harder. We always have to strive for,
gotta be
top
twice better.
excellence.
Yeah.
And I had a few clients that they like, I just get tired of that. I get so overwhelmed by this idea
Right.
that I have to be the top performer all the time. I have to reach all of the top heights. Maybe I just don't want that life. I don't want
Right.
to be the CEO. I don't want to be the VP because they constantly got to travel. They got to put out all
Right.
the fires. I just want to be comfortable and happy with my work. And
I
it
just
took
want
me a
peace.
minute. Yeah, exactly. It took me a minute to even conceptualize that because I'm like, I'm so used well, naturally I am a high achiever, so I'm like, I do want, all of those things. But I think that it's sometimes a message that this is the expectation specifically for us, but not consistent across the board. And so I did want to mention that and I thought what you said was spot on, which is
And
why go ahead.
no, I was gonna say, and to add on to that, I know, like you said, like the childhood experiences, maybe from parental experiences, but think about those individuals who've always just been naturally good, right? So, like
Mhm,
I tested into gifted and talented when I was in elementary school, right? I was
mhm.
always accustomed to making good grades. I was always, when
Oh,
I went
you.
straight from kindergarten to a master's program with no breaks, right? So you like finish school, go to the next, finish school, go to the next. When I finished my master's degree, I had a bit of like an identity crisis because it's like I'm always used to
Oh.
achieving. Like, what do I do?
Mhm.
Right, what do I do? Like, I'm used to doing all these things. So, what do I do now? And so I think the importance of recognizing, identifying yourself outside of being a high achiever, right? So,
Oh,
we
that's
could think about like the LeBrons and the Serenas and all the people who are operating at the top of their level at all the time, but then also recognizing that what you do is not who you are. And
yeah,
so kind of allowing yourself to not be perfect, to make some mistakes, to show up, like you said, where I don't have to be strong, or I don't have to, do all the things that is expected of me, you know.
yeah. I feel
Yeah.
like that's an evolution for high achievers because I remember hearing Kevin Hart talking to like interviewing a celebrity and he mentioned a time where he had this conversation with Kobe Bryant after he had retired and he said Kobe Bryant, we know Kobe Bryant, the Kobe Bryant, like high
Mhm.
achievers is, just breaking all of these barriers
Yeah.
and it just, he talked about how he got to this point where he stopped feeling the need to do that, and he felt so free. Like it was like you said, it was like a marathon of I have to perform at this level and I have to reach this height and I have to do this and I have to do that. And
Right.
in that it's so tunnel vision. It's so like, I can't get out the race and and so I have to keep going. And I feel like there's so many people that get stuck in that in a way that
Hmm.
they recognize it, but they can't kind of get out of that fast lane to be able to say it's okay. I actually might have peace over here. I'm seeking it, but I still want to get out the fast lane. And so that was really, really empowering to see, especially knowing, how much success he's had and just so many just records broken in that way. I felt like hearing that made me think about self-care because a lot of times when you are in, just the fast lane, self-care is not always there with you.
Right. Right.
It is essential for managing stress and maintaining your overall well-being. And so I want to ask you, what are some self-care practices you prioritize in your daily routine, and how do you contribute or how do they contribute to your resilience and your success as a high achiever?
Right, right. Yeah, I think again, like many of us are taught to ignore how we feel, in
Mhm.
order to get the job done, and I think that mentality really sets us up for failure, right? And me included. And I just want to share a little story right quick. Like when I was working on my hours to become a professional counselor, I worked in a mental health hospital, so psych hospital, behavioral health, depending on the area you're in, and the unit that I worked on, it was surprising to me, I guess, because when you think about like a psych hospital, you think about like kind of the worst of the worst and like the crazy people and stuff like that. So when I worked on that unit, and literally my unit was full of high achievers. I had executive chefs, I had lawyers, I had teachers, I had Olympians. And that was a awakening for me because here I am in this hospital with these people who are just like me, right? Who are used to operating at the top of their game. And for whatever reason, for them, the only other option became suicide, right? So
Mhm.
it's like that constant pushing yourself, that constant, um, I'm failing in some way, led them to the hospital. And I think that was one of the earlier things that helped me realize, like, wait a minute, you need to get this stress in check because we are all one bad day or one overwhelmed situation from sitting in this hospital, right?
Yeah,
And so
that's so true.
I think, yeah. So when you talk about kind of like the daily self care routine, I say it constantly. Self care is not selfish. We cannot pour from an empty cup. We know the airlines tell us to put our mask on first. Um, so what I had to come to understand about my own stress needs is number one, listening to my body, right? So I
Mhm.
talked about kind of that window of tolerance. If you once you know what your warning signs are, you can be more sensitive to them to take action a little bit quicker, right? So I know for me, if I'm starting to get a headache or I'm starting to like try to seek out all the sweets that I'm finding, something else is going on. And so
Yeah.
that's time for me to check in with myself and say, okay, what are you stressed about? Um, what's happening? I just recently learned that I grind in my sleep when I'm stressed out. Like I grind my teeth in my sleep when
Mhm.
I'm stressed out. So knowing what your warning signs are, if you don't know, if you maybe you just don't know, you have been so detached, or like you put it earlier, compartmentalized from your feelings. The
Mhm.
people around you know when you stressed out, right? So
Yeah.
asking, siblings, significant others, parents, people who you trust, asking them,
Mhm.
how do you know when I'm stressed? And they'd be like, oh, you mean, or you do this and you do that. That's just information to help you become more self-aware, to help you become more emotionally intelligent, so that way you can do what you need to do. Again, for me, it's journaling. I journal a
Mhm.
lot. I journal when I'm happy, when I'm mad, when I'm sad, when I'm just have a lot on my mind, just journaling, brain dumping, like I said, bullet points. Setting boundaries is one thing that I do in my own life. Hasn't been easy, but I do it. Setting boundaries are just like the limits, and the rules that we set in our own life to teach people how to treat us, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure people have heard the saying like we teach people how to treat us. And so there's a great book called Set Boundaries, Find Peace.
Mhm.
I think her name is Nidra Tawab. I'm probably messing up her name, but that is an excellent book to
Mhm.
show kind of different scenarios of setting boundaries and what that looks like. And then something else I do personally, prioritize a lot. Like I said, one of the important things for me was realizing that I can't do everything. And it's
Yeah.
okay that I can't do everything. Prioritizing what's the most important thing for me in this moment. What
Yeah.
needs to happen in this moment. I do a lot of delegating. Thankfully, I have a husband that's on board with helping me with all my crazy ideas and the things that I want to do.
Yeah.
My son is 10, allowing him to do a lot of things for himself, and then eliminating a lot of things. If it is not aligned with my values, I just don't do it.
Yeah.
And it has taken a while for me to get to that point. My top three values are my family, my faith, and my freedom. And so for me, if it doesn't align with one of those three things, then that helps me choose right there. Then I'm not going to do it. So,
Yeah, for sure. Understanding your values are huge because they
hmm
definitely help put into perspective why you do some of the stuff you do,
exactly.
and why you don't do some of the stuff you do. And one thing you said that I guess I never really thought about was the people around you, like asking them how they can recognize your stress because that improves your self awareness. A lot of times when
Mhm.
people think about self awareness, they think about I got to look at myself and see what I'm coming up with and improve that. But and that's true, right? That's a part of it, that internal
Right.
assessment. But also external awareness is important because we all have blind spots. There's just stuff that we just
hmm
can't see in ourselves, and getting feedback, seeking feedback or
Yeah.
opportunities to understand ourselves deeper can help us to adjust some of the things that we just don't recognize. Stress is a creepy little thing in the sense that you can't always see it. You don't recognize it all the
Yeah.
time. You probably have normalized a lot of what you're experiencing. You may not even know, like you said, teeth grinding. He was like, I didn't even know that was happening. It was
hmm
happening in my sleep. Like so, things like that. Like how do you battle something sometimes? It's that's blind, but seeking other opportunities. And I love that you have such a strong support system in
hmm
your husband and just people around you to be able to seek that feedback, to be able to be supported when you have different high achiever ideas and
Yeah.
tasks to do. Because support systems play such a crucial role in stress management, providing encouragement, perspective, and assistance during challenging times. I do realize that as you are growing in your high achievement. Now you said you kind of been a high achiever all your life. You was like, I
A
didn't,
whole lot.
I became high IQ girl from just a very, very young age. So I imagine this is not as challenging for you. But I do think that as we become adults and we continue to high achieve, it can feel lonely in the sense that not everybody is going to be there with you. And some of the people that are even parts of your comfort, support not always can be a part of your high levels of success. So not to say you can't still connect with them, but I do think we outgrow some of our support systems, and it's important to kind of looking in that. Like, how do you cultivate and leverage your support network to help you cope with stress and navigate setbacks?
Yeah. I think one of the common misconceptions for like people who are super ambitious or high achievers is that like they have to always have it together, right? Like
Mm,
and I think that's where some of that loneliness comes into play is where, when you feel like everybody's expecting you, like you're the person that everybody comes to,
mhm,
and you feel like everybody's expecting you to have it together. It's like, well, you don't really have permission to not have it together, right?
mhm.
You don't really have an opportunity to fall apart, or you're everybody's dependent on you to do something. And I think many high achievers won't typically ask for help because sometimes it's just easier to get it done by yourself. It's easier to figure things out, right? Rather
Yeah.
than risk the disappointment of, depending on somebody else, or, well, I reached out and they're like, "Oh, you got it." Right? It almost
Mhm.
fosters a sense of like hyper independence, right? Like I got it. I don't need nobody else. I can do it.
Right.
And for me, it's taken time to learn to let go. So learning to let go of that assumption that I have to keep it all together, right?
Mm,
Learning to let go of, well, I'm not trying to be out here looking silly, or, you know, admitting that I need help because I want something different, right? So
yeah.
for me personally, it was slowing down and allowing myself to be vulnerable, right? So when we are hyper independent, we hold on tight, right? We want to make
Mhm.
sure we stay in control, and so part of giving up control, or part of the surrender, is allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, but then also being vulnerable to people that you trust.
Mhm.
I think identifying maybe one or two people that you can check in with on a weekly basis. I know that's what I do. I'm an
Mhm,
introvert. I'm very shy. It might not seem like it, but I am. So there's a couple of people that I just keep close that I know are going to be honest with me. They're not going to be yes people. They are the people in my life that will hold up the mirror and say, "Girl, get it together."
mhm.
And so allowing myself to kind of talk regularly with those people, and I recognize a lot of people don't have a strong support system.
Yeah.
So even if that means, again, going to therapy,
Mhm,
therapy has become so much more affordable than it has in the past, right? Before it was like a class thing, like the more
mhm.
money you had, then it became an option for you. But I think now there's so many options to get into therapy and to talk about the things that you wouldn't allow yourself to talk about with people in your circle, right? I
Yeah.
think being honest with yourself. So kind of going back to how you handle stress, being honest with yourself and like, I'm not okay.
Mhm.
And knowing that it's okay to not be okay. And then knowing that there's routes that you can take when you're not okay, where you can still feel competent and reassured, but also know that you can touch base on, okay, I need to figure out what's going to be best for me in this moment.
Yeah, I love that. Just being honest with yourself, allowing yourself to be vulnerable. I think that's sometimes hard, and people
Hmm.
don't find that a safe space to be or just easy to like, I don't want to go into that space. I feel like there's this connotation or this idea that in order to be in a good place or in order to be positive, I only can look at the good things and I can't acknowledge those bad things because that's bringing me into a bad place. But in
Hmm.
reality, it's allowing you to free yourself. Like one of the things you mentioned was talking about like journaling. One thing I talk about journaling sometime, y'all. It comes up. And one thing I love about journaling is when you start writing, I don't know if this happens for you, but when you start writing, this happens to me. I might be like, oh, I'm writing because this thing, right, that's on my mind. Cause obviously it's like getting something out when
Hmm.
you don't have anywhere else to put it in that moment. So at least I can write it down or type it because I use an app. Um, when you start writing, other stuff starts coming out that you may
Hmm.
or may not have realized was even there.
Right,
And you just kind of was releasing one thing, but then your brain and your emotional space allows you to release a lot of
right,
other stuff. And so it's actually healthy to acknowledge those vulnerable parts of yourself and give yourself permission to say some things are not great and that's okay. And embrace your flaws and stuff. I know me, I'll get up and be speaking about something or talking about something and forget where I was going. And it happens enough to where I can laugh at it. That's one thing I'm like, I'm not gonna be mad about it because it just
right,
happens sometimes. But I think sometimes some people when they real hard on themselves, they were like, I can't let this happen. And if it does, then I'm just gonna be really upset with myself for this and I gotta stop that and this, that, and the other. For me, it's just an opportunity to be human and
right,
make myself relatable to other people who may go through certain things that is not perfect about themselves. And so I just lean into it. It's an honest moment. And so um, just move around it, just, embrace it, just accept like those parts of yourself and allow yourself to be free in it.
right.
And I love just finding outlets for support because, like you said, some people have support systems to where they know, okay, I know who I can call. Some people don't have that, but that doesn't mean that you have to be in this place of isolation or loneliness emotionally in what you're going through.
And I would say, just to add to what you said, some people have more support than they maybe allow themselves to realize,
Mhm.
right? So one of the challenges is, when you are, high achiever and you feel like everything needs to be perfect, then you won't even allow yourself to, like you said, to show those imperfections, right? You want to
Mhm.
always say, "Oh, I'm fine," or "Girl, everything is good." But when we allow ourselves to be transparent to the people in our lives, and I'm not talking about, the people
Yeah.
that can't hold water and will go tell your business to
Right.
everybody, but you do know you can identify at least one person
Yeah.
in your life that, if you truly allowed yourself to be vulnerable and transparent, that person will be like a scaffolding and still hold you up, while when you're struggling.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that because um, vulnerability is definitely about safety because you're going into a
Mhm.
sensitive place. Everybody is not able to protect that sensitive place for you. And so the
Right.
people that you like, and it is risky. I'll say that too, because like you don't, like you said, sometimes it's people around you you did not even realize that they were that safe place. But allowing yourself to kind of take that chance, put some of your
Mhm.
emotions out there. You got to tell them your whole life story, but just invite them into like just some of your real spaces and see how you receive support in that moment. And
Mhm.
sometimes you're gonna realize, oh my gosh, that felt so good. I'm so glad
Yeah.
I have this person in my life. I'm so glad that they were able to support me in that
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah.
The vulnerability is important.
Yeah, and it's a scary space, especially when I think a lot of high achieving is about maintaining control, right?
Mhm,
And sometimes maintaining control is because maybe we didn't feel like we were safe, or we had to, take things in our own hands, and we had to, show up for ourselves at a time where we weren't really prepared to, like going back to childhood. So I think for those who really struggle with identifying support, maybe putting a little sprinkle of things out there. Like you said, you don't have to tell your whole life story, but maybe you share something, a little bit of something, and see how that person responds to slowly build trust, right? And
yeah.
trusting yourself enough to know that if it goes sour, that you can build a new relationship, or you can, do what you need to do to get the support you
Absolutely.
need. Yeah.
So on that patience, I just feel like that
Mhm.
doesn't completely ever go off for them. And I'm, part of that. But how do you balance striving for excellence and taking time to rest, to recharge, to enjoy life outside of work and academic pursuits?
I think first recognizing that just because you rest doesn't make you any less excellent, right? It doesn't make you lazy. It doesn't make you, like you're falling behind or anything, because balance is key, right?
Mhm,
So even if, like we talked about earlier, even if you have to schedule in the rest and
mhm,
then actually rest. Right. So not like running through your list while you trying to go to sleep, or, if you going to get a manicure and pedicure, not on the phone or not thinking about these things, but truly being in the moment, being very mindful, right? Mindfulness is present moment awareness, non judgmentally. So allowing
mhm,
yourself to be in the moment, allowing yourself to take the breaks. Maybe you don't feel like, maybe the culture of your company is that we work 60 hours a week and nobody takes breaks. Even if you could snatch 5 minutes to yourself, if that means, on your lunch break, you just sitting in the car, right? Or whatever that looks like for you to steal those moments. Because while it might seem more productive to keep pushing yourself, again, you're doing yourself and the people around you a disservice if you are constantly operating on fumes. Because again, your body will shut down
mhm,
if you don't allow your body to take the breaks and to take the rest that you need. I think another important aspect is celebrating your accomplishments. I think, again, for ambitious individuals or high performers or high achievers, there's always the next box to check. It's
mhm,
always the next thing to do, always the next goal to reach, um, and not enough time celebrating what you've already done,
mhm,
right? So, celebrating the accomplishments, large and small. Like, did you complete your big three for that day? Did
mhm,
you, reach this milestone, and celebrating it, right? It might be doing a little dance. It might be getting yourself a cookie. It might be whatever that celebration is, because when we keep track of hitting our goals, we kind of create this little story of how wonderful we are, and the things that we're able to do. So when we do fall on tough times and we do feel stressed out, and we maybe start to have that negative conversation of, I can't never do anything right, or, whatever that internal dialogue looks like, we can reflect back and say,
mhm.
well, no, I did do this thing, or, I did make that happen. So, kind of a internal boost um, for ourselves. So,
Bill Gates talked about how he had to rethink about productivity. He was saying that for
mhm,
him, when he thought about productivity, it meant what you were doing, what meeting you were in, how you were showing how that time was being used. And so he kind of looked at his employees' calendars to be able to see, like, what are they doing every second of every day type thing to define
right.
their productivity. And he said he looked at Warren Buffett's philosophy on productivity, and it made him think because Warren Buffett says there's days where he has nothing on his schedule, and that's a part of his productivity because he uses those days to think and come up with, almost kind of let himself go into that creative space and
Yeah.
plan for new things. And it's like he don't, he's not sitting in front of the computer. He might be sitting outside and just enjoying the weather and by the pool or something like that. But for him, that was still productive and necessary for how he worked.
Right.
Because he said, if I'm constantly in meetings, I'm not giving myself those opportunities to have those creative visions and let them blossom and flourish and all of that stuff that only he can do. Now, I've even
Yeah.
heard other people talking about, having thinking days you know, and so I could totally see that. And I know this year we both, are part of the Black Women Healing Together retreat where, that's totally about recharging. It's,
Yeah.
all of the rest and just kind of unplugging for everything. And so I feel like that's something to look forward to. And I've seen where other people do that, they'll kind of schedule
Hmm.
their complete unplugs. Not to say that's the only time you can do it, but it's very helpful to like think about travel or enjoying time in the way of like self-care as well, because it doesn't have to be I'm gonna schedule a trip where I'm gonna be busy, I'm gonna be running around nonstop,
Right.
or I'm just going to turn up and just have fun. While those are
Right.
great, part of self-care can be like I'm treating myself to something that is just gonna bring me peace and
Right.
opportunity
That's
to release
perfect.
certain things that have built up over time. And so
Right.
I
No,
like that.
absolutely. I love that. When you talk about kind of Bill Gates and Warren Buffett too, and just having time to do nothing. Like it's
Mhm.
okay to not schedule every minute of every day. Just to be in that space, just to be present. We're human beings, not human doing, right? You want to make sure you just kind of allow yourself to be in that space. And yeah, that's one of the things I'm looking forward to the most about the retreat is just to be in a space where I can unplug and to not
Mhm.
do and to whatever I wake up in that moment, that morning and want to do, then I do.
Yep.
One of the things me and my husband recently implemented, was kind of having these staycations.
Mhm.
So he's also a high achiever too. He won't admit it,
Mhm.
but he is. But
Mhm.
having those moments to break away. So it doesn't always have to be like I'm gonna plan this trip or I'm gonna go, get this massage. But for us, it's like 3 days local like hotel. I think usually we
Mhm.
budget anywhere from like $100 to $300. Like just those time. That's just you doing you, whatever that looks like, right? So
Mhm.
if you just want to go to sleep, if you just want to watch TV. I think one of the first ones we did, he called me and he was like, I feel like I should be doing something. I'm like, the purpose is that you're supposed to do nothing, right? And stop calling
Yeah.
me because you need to be by yourself. So really scheduling that time or let's see, if you can get with other moms or if you can get with other dads or wherever you can be in a space where you can just kind of be present and not have a laundry list of things going on in your mind
Mhm.
will be helpful, and just kind of reducing your overall stress and just that aspect of self-care in and of itself.
I like that you guys value your time alone and you support each
Mhm.
other in that, because I think that's breaking the cycle too from our
Mhm.
just culture and some of our generations to thinking that you have to operate under these kind of rules, especially if you have a
Right.
family and there are no breaks and you're supposed to constantly be doing something, especially if
Right.
you're wearing multiple hats, like you're a parent or you work for some place or you have your own
Mhm.
all of them next, because I have allowed myself that space to recharge. It's
Yeah.
super, super helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And you just feel so much better when you can like reduce the pressure of I need to be somewhere, I need to be doing this
Mhm.
thing. Sometimes you don't. You just need to be present. Right.
Yeah. And so I know we talked about high achievers. We even talked about you navigating a stressful situation in your life.
Mhm.
Is there any advice that you would offer to others that are striving to manage stress while pursuing their ambitions?
Yeah. Um, I think what was honestly game changing for me was to not only just listen to my body, but to really drill down and figure out what it was that I value, what is important to me. So if I can encourage anybody to do anything, is to really think about what is the most important things to you. There's a lot of like values quizzes, use tests. In some of my previous roles, we would get like a stack of 100 values and make people drill down. It's a very challenging thing to do, but I think when you get clear, like crystal clear on what's important to you, then all the things that you do, all the demands that are on your time start to make more sense because does this fit? Does this not fit? Is this in alignment? Is this not in alignment? And it helps you make decisions that make the most sense for you versus, like you said, what is society telling me to do? What is historically
Mhm,
this role that I'm in telling me to do? What is, all these multiple hats telling me to do? If it
mhm.
doesn't fall in line with those things that you say are the most important to you, then don't do it, right? And that just brings you so much more peace. And I think, and it's not to say that all the stress goes away because, again, stress is not bad, right? And as long as
Yeah.
you're living and breathing, you can expect to feel stressed. But I think the way that we manage our stress and kind of maintain ourselves on a day-to-day basis is what allows us to have, a life worth living and to really kind of leave our mark and show up
Mhm.
in this world.
I love that. I like the values thing so much because, and one thing I realized about values is assessing them regularly
Mhm.
because the values you have evolved and changed just based on where you are in your life and
Absolutely.
can be helpful in shaping like, okay, how do I look at this next season I'm in? Because I would say there are times that I am absolutely in grind mode. I have something
Hmm.
coming up and I'm hyper focused on getting that done. And I might say, this is going to be a busy week, which I have learned to like spread it out so it doesn't have to be so overbearing. However,
Yeah.
there are times where I'm completely in rest mode. I'm like, I just don't have anything I want to do right now. I just kind of want to maintain things. I like
Yeah.
the calmness of life right now, and I'm gonna keep it this way for a little bit, and that's okay too. Like it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be always super low impact. It doesn't have to be always high intensity. Like you said, the
Right.
sustained, prolonged stress and how that contributes to health breakdown is the issue. It's not that you can avoid stress. It's part of the human experience, but how do we find that balance? And so I love that idea of like looking at your values, seeing what's important to you. Because if you are having a lot of stress, you may be operating against those values, or you may be going too long into that place and you need to find
Right.
balance. You need to take some breaks.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and I think having again going back to like that grace and compassion for yourself, that there's a reason, a time, and a season for everything that we do, and just kind of allowing ourselves to not to rest without guilt, right,
Mm-hmm.
and to work without burnout, right. So that's kind of where that balance lies. How much is too much for us, and knowing where you are, having enough insight, enough again emotional intelligence, enough self awareness to say this works for me or this doesn't work for me and being okay with communicating it to the people who need to know it.
Yeah.
Mm.
Thank you so much, Rachel. You shared
Yeah.
some golden things. I could see how this is definitely just your stumping ground. This stress management, self-care. Like you are amazing at talking about this. I wanna give you an opportunity just to tell people where they can find you, how they can subscribe to you, contact you if they need to.
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is Ometris Nicole CC. So we'll type it, but it's OMETRESSNICOLECC.com. That's my coaching business. So definitely check me out. I do have an ebook Achievers. So if you want to sign up and grab that, it's completely free. You can email me at hello@ometrisnicolecc.com. You can find me on social media, Ometris Nicole CC. So yeah, if you see me, out in those social media worlds, please say hi. If anything resonated with you, please let me know. But yeah, I love working with, like I said, the high achievers and the ambitious individuals in particular because they are not seen as much as they should be.
Yes, absolutely. And I just want to thank our viewers for tuning in today. As you know, we are on the Bianca Williams podcast is on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Google Podcast.
Mhm.
So subscribe, like, comment, and share. I do encourage you to share this episode and check out future episodes, past episodes, because there's just so much wisdom that comes out of this. I definitely thank you for joining, and I hope you
Thank
have
you,
a
guys.
great rest of your day. Thank you so much, Rachel, for being here and sharing your wonderful wisdom. And any last words?
Um, Take care of yourself out there.
Take
Yeah.
care of yourself out there is the theme. I love that. Thank
Yeah.
you. See you next time.
All right. Bye.